Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. Just a note that we're not, although we are being videotaped, we're not live tonight due to the transfer of the INAT from the old high school to the new high school. So you'll be able to watch this meeting on video later, but it's not being telecast this evening. First order of business is to sign the warrant for September 9th state primary. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the September 9th, 2014 state primary warrant.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Fode. All in favor?
Aye.
I want to ask a question about the warrant.
Yes, you can write yourself in.
I'm not familiar with the term counselor. Is that for the governor's council?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to verify that, because I don't think many people are aware of that. And then you have, for the senator and the rep, they call it general court?
Yes.
They just don't call it state senator? Or?
That's right.
No wonder they're
Representatives in the general court.
Senator in the general.
No
Senator of the general
No
court.
wonder they're confused at the State House. Okay.
Okay. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
You got a witness this,
John?
John?
Make your X.
Too glad I brought it back then, huh?
Thank you, yeah.
We learned a long time ago. You were right knuckles.
Need it back then?
Michael's not here.
Yeah, you should leave.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, with the minutes of August 4th, 2014, regular session, Mr. O'Leary.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the August 4th, 2014 regular session minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, second by Mr. Yule. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? We also have executive session for August 4th. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the August 4th, 2014 executive session minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Anyone here for public comment? Smith Agreement.
Let's see.
I have-
Okay. You have a motion? No, let's see.
I don't have a motion for it, no.
Um, Mr. Chairman, I move to release the signed agreement between the Town of North Reading Board of Selectmen and Linda M. Smith and William A. Smith, President of Smith and Sons Plumbing and Heating, to the public domain.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, this agreement was entered into by the Board of Selectmen and the Smiths back in May and submitted to Superior Court as a final settlement agreement in relation to the previous purchase of the Smith property off of Route 62. The the property itself, the taking, and all the ancillary issues associated with that taking, was involved in some litigation, specifically in relation to access and the bridges. If you recall, if everybody recalls, when we took the property, the town was not necessarily under the understanding that we had access to the property. After surveying, after the purchase of the property and approval of town meeting, again, this property was under a certain type of tax situation where the town had 120 days to exercise their option, which we did. We didn't have time to do all the necessary due diligence in relation to the surveying, but that didn't matter. Town meeting approved the purchase of the property. After the surveying was done, it was determined that the town had access over 1.5 of the bridges, and the Smiths had access over half the bridges. We tried to enter into a cross easement settlement agreement, which was later in dispute. As a result of those disputes and ongoing litigation, the Board of Selectmen determined that it was in the town's best interest to enter into a settlement agreement. The settlement agreement agrees to give the bridges back, and this portion of land back to the Smiths for their maintenance and upkeep, rather than the town having to bring it up to certain standards and access. And we retain what we originally thought we were going to get, which was a large parcel of land with questionable access at this particular point in time. The land, again, has been subject of a lot of conjecture as to what we're going to do with it in the future. There was no particular plan in mind, other than making sure that it was retained at least for some open space and public purposes later on, later to be determined, and access will be determined at a later date also. LUC is looking at different potential uses for it, and this is a final settlement agreement. As far as giving the bridges back, those portions of land that includes the bridges, as well as $50,000 to cover a portion of their costs of litigating the case. This is a final settlement agreement that both parties have agreed to. The $50,000 issue will have to be okayed at the October town meeting. It is the intent of the Board of Selectmen to put an article on the warrant to fund the $50,000 and urge the community and town meeting to support it.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Yule.
Yes, if I may. I'm going to be abstaining on this because I was not part of the negotiations of the whole process, so I will be abstaining.
Okay. On the, do we have a motion? Yes.
Yes, and again, just as, again,
I second.
to Mr. Yule's point, Mr. Yule was on the board at the time that we took the property,
Yes, that's correct.
and then had a brief hiatus. And in the interim, Mr. Delaney was a member of the board at the time when we negotiated the settlement and signed it. So Mr. Delaney's signature is on the agreement. But you were prominently mentioned along with the rest of us in the suit.
So on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Mr.
Abstaining?
Mr. Chair, I just want to remind everybody, we were just voting on releasing
Just
the
releasing.
information. We did not, this wasn't the vote on that
Right.
agreement. That had taken
Place in
That had taken
executive
place in
session.
executive session prior to this meeting.
All right. So it's 3 in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
And the recording secretary will have to make sure you have that properly, because I didn't have a motion made. All right?
I do not have this thing running.
That's okay.
Okay. Okay, next on our agenda is Mr. Mark Favreau asked to come before the board to make a presentation regarding the naming of the middle school. Mr. Favreau.
Mr. Chairman, would you like at this particular time to share town council's opinion in relation to the process and what?
My intent was to do it. I didn't know whether it would be best to do it before or after.
Well, I just think in relation to, I'm more than happy to listen to, watching the presentation, but I think everybody should know what the
Okay.
process
Thank
is
you.
going to be.
Okay. So, Mr. Favreau, if you could hold off just for a couple of minutes.
Okay. Town administrator requested of town council an opinion in relation to what effect a citizen's petition would have in relation to naming a public building, and the process that needs to take place. Let me just see if I can find it here. You have it? Thank you. We also had asked for some clarification in relation to, if the board were to try and take some sort of action to slow the process down a little bit, because we weren't sure collectively as to where we were going with this or not, and what the process was going to be. But to the crux of the matter is town council has opined that town meeting ratifies action taken by the custodial boards. In this particular case, the custodial board is the school committee. If we were going to rename town hall, it would be the Board of Selectmen. The school committee needs to take some sort of positive action in relation to recommending the naming of, whether it be a building, a portion of the building, a room, the auditorium, anything of that nature. They have to take some sort of positive action and put it forth for consideration and ratification by town meeting. So the custodial board makes a determination and a recommendation to do something. Town meeting ratifies. Town meeting in and of itself and by themselves cannot name a building, a room, or a park for someone or some group of people without the custodial board's consent. So if, in the absence of the school committee's action, if they choose not to take any action at this point before the October town meeting, and assuming town meeting votes to act favorably on this citizen's petition, it would be treated as an advisory opinion only to the custodial board. So the school committee then would have to take some sort of positive action. If they take no action, nothing happens. So just to let you know up front, the citizen's petition and the action that you're proposing, in the absence of a favorable vote of the school committee, does nothing but advise the school committee as to what the wishes of town meeting would be. If town meeting, again, if the school committee acts before that, then it's ratified, it's good. If the school committee acts 3 months from now favorably on the recommendation, they don't have to go back to town meeting because town meeting will have already ratified that action. But if they don't take any action, or they choose not to, or if they wanted to name it for somebody else, that would have to go back to town meeting for action, for approval. Okay, so just to let you know what the process and what you're engaged in right now, what could happen. Right.
So is now a good time for comments, or should I?
Sure.
Presentation, should I hold my, do I just hold off?
Yeah, you can if you want, but if you do, please use the podium so that it gets recorded and people can hear you.
Anybody else want to jump in first? I don't know. Anybody have any questions of Steve? Have to say?
Yeah, so I don't understand.
Okay, if you could use just the podium, and it's not so much, it's not for us, it's for the recording so that people on TV can hear it later on. This isn't live, by the way.
Hi, Grace Ventura, 25 Peter Road, North Reading, Massachusetts, for 33 years. So I'm just a little confused, and bear with me, I'm not very good at these things. So the school committee has to recommend, yet the town can't, so town meeting can't tell the school committee to do, so if we go to town meeting, and there's a vote in town meeting that we would like this proposal of Mr. Favreau's.
It becomes strictly advisory to the school committee that town meeting would like to see this happen.
Is there any other way?
It's not binding.
Okay, is there any other way by a town vote or something that we can have the school committee?
No, town council's opinion is that it's up to the custodial board or body that controls the facility.
Mhm.
Again, whether it be, the Board of Selectmen would be town hall, DPW garage,
Yep.
fire station, police station, parks, things of that nature. School committee is school property. They're the custodial body. They have to decide to name something. What our bylaw has done, before they could do it unilaterally, without town meeting approval or anybody else's approval, they just say, we
Okay,
want
so
to
that's the past.
Right,
That happened in the past, okay.
And then back in 1997, town meeting said, time out, what we'd like to do, before this gets too out of hand, is that when a local board decides to name some room or building or facility for somebody,
Mhm.
we want town meeting to ratify that action.
Okay,
So town meeting acts as a ratifying agent, they don't initiate, they ratify.
okay,
So the responsibility lies with the custodial boards to do it. Town meeting has to ratify. If town meeting, the school committee says they want to name it for Steve O'Leary, and town meeting says, I don't think so, it doesn't happen,
okay.
all right?
But if town meeting
If town
says
meeting
we,
says, I want to name it for Steve O'Leary, and the school committee says, I don't think so, it doesn't happen.
okay.
So it's not done in a vacuum.
And
And
how is
again,
it done in other communities, do you
I have
know?
no idea.
Does the town council know how it's done in other communities?
I mean, I can tell you, we didn't request that information from council.
Can
but
we
there-
find that out?
But it would depend upon whether there was a bylaw relative to naming of public facilities
Mhm.
or not in that community.
Okay,
That's
thank
what
you
we're
very much.
describing.
Anyone else like to be heard? Mr. Favreau?
So, in preparation for the meeting, I spent a little time at the library trying to go through the bylaws for the town. And as you all know, it's a quite voluminous document. And I could not find anything, and I would love to be able to be told where I could find it, anything in the bylaws that exist today that go through the process that you just talked about. The only one that I saw was that the naming of any building, field, et cetera, has to be done through town meeting. And I didn't see anything expanded on that, or it would be just great to have the information as to, where that sits in the bylaws. Maybe I
Sure.
missed it.
Sure, absolutely. So with regard to the local bylaw that I've cited, it would be Article 7, Section 5-27, and it's available on the town's website as well, if you wanted to review it. And then also governing the naming of a public facility is Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 3, which specifies the custody of public property in a town or a city in Massachusetts. Those are the two main areas that I would refer you to for additional information with regard to the naming of a property.
Okay. Is there a copy of that available, just so
We
I
can
can know
give you a
where to
copy of
find
this.
it? Yeah.
We could certainly give you a copy of this.
I don't know how I missed it. Okay, I don't know how much, does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Go ahead, Gary.
Gary Hunt, 259 Elm Street. Could be the first time I've been in front of this board in 28 years as a private citizen. But you're not going to see anything different. Basically, I guess the issue is, in this particular case, the process that I think of that runs this country and that flag is called a democratic process, the voice of the people. And the people are speaking very loudly and strongly regarding the naming of this school after this particular esteemed gentleman. And the question I guess I have is that the voice of the people isn't important in making the recommendation to town meeting as to what the building should be named. They get the choice to either agree or disagree, but they don't have the opportunity to make the recommendation as to what it should be named. That doesn't seem very democratic to me. I wasn't aware of this because the Board of Health doesn't have any custodial buildings that they can name anybody after. And we don't have a wastewater treatment plant. I thought that would be mine.
That would be
But in any case, how do other boards do it? I mean, just out of curiosity, when you gentlemen get asked to name a building, whatever it may be, if you've had that opportunity, how does that take place? How do you get the public engaged in that
Well,
process?
I guess to answer your question is, the public is engaged in this. You made a presentation to the school committee, you're making a presentation to the board, you're getting the message out. If the school committee has to make the ultimate recommendation, I would assume that a large group of people with this kind of an interest would have some influence over what the school committee does. Similar to the board, if we were going to name town hall, or someone wanted to name town hall something, and a large group got together and they come to town meeting and voted favorably on the article, even though it isn't automatic because the board hasn't proposed it, the board would have to weigh heavily on what town meeting had to say. So I understand it's not as direct as evidently people thought initially, including us. It wasn't,
Right.
when we started to do some research to try to get an answer. As you heard in our last meeting, none of us felt comfortable with just a quick march to name a building.
Right.
It just didn't seem, it seemed that it didn't allow the entire town to weigh in, or the responsible custodians of the building to have a say in it. And, evidently, our people before us have thought through that and made appropriate changes so that that couldn't happen.
So the primary mission here is obviously to try and influence or sell this proposal to the school
Well,
committee.
I think gaining support on anything that, the larger portion, majority of the community would like to see is important.
I think just in relation to, my recollection over the years, is whenever some building, room, park was to be named, I can't think of a time when it wasn't initiated at the board level. There was public sentiment in favor of it, but someone on the board proposed something, like Rita Mullen Field.
Right.
Things of that. It was proposed by a member of the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen took a position and favorably recommended and town meeting approved. One of those things.
Dick
But
Spindler
prior to
way, yeah.
1997, the board could just do it. We could name this room the Robert Messeri Room, things of that nature. Now we have to go to town meeting to do so. This is the first time that I can recall in a long time where it hasn't been initiated. Again, it can start in the community, but it hasn't been initiated through a board member for board consideration, whether, not our board, but in this particular case, the school committee, where they would then deliberate. Now, my understanding is they have a longstanding policy which says, the high school and the middle school aren't going to be named for anybody. And so in order for them to deliberate over this, they would have to, first of all, revisit their policy, move to amend it, and then do it, and then bring it to town meeting.
Okay.
But as far as the democratic process being circumvented, I don't necessarily buy into that argument. I mean, the 5 members of the school committee are duly elected to be custodians of the school department, school budget, school buildings, school everything. So they're duly elected to represent the people out there. That doesn't mean that they aren't responsive to public opinion and suggestions from the public that are brought forth. It's just a question of what's the process been to this point in time, and are they inclined to embrace it yet or not? Are they ready to embrace it? As far as the process and how it works, and they don't have a process in place because their policy doesn't allow for it at this point in time. There's going to be an article in the town meeting warrant to name the Arts Center for Ellen Adele. That was initiated through the school committee. Long member of the faculty and engaged thousands of students and a wonderful person, and also less $625,000 or $650,000, to the school department for various usage. It's a nice testament. And the school committee initiated that. Town meeting will be asked to ratify it. So the process is pretty clear. It is democratic. Your democratically elected officials should be responsive to whatever's put forth for them and deliberate and make a recommendation one way or the other. So,
Okay.
and then town meeting ratifies that action or not.
Okay.
But you need both steps.
Okay.
And again, it's not, and again, I'm not putting this out here to put a damper on anything, because the enthusiasm is terrific. And the person that's being suggested is certainly worthy of consideration. I don't know what other consideration's been given to other people. It hasn't been done in a public forum. The school committee hasn't got a process in place to deliberate over that and hasn't set anything up yet. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Yule?
Yes. I think one of the other concerns that we had, if town meeting was responsible for naming buildings and fields and so on, every year, someone can come forward and want to rename or name a location, a building, a field, and what have you. They could even change a name. So this could happen every year if it was just left up to town meeting being the determining factor for the naming of a facility. So
Since 1997, how many times has that happened, sir?
0.
0. The point is that it can happen. It can happen 5 years from now, it can happen 3 years from now.
Right,
but since Okay.
1997, it's happened 0 times.
But that- You should be at the mic from the beginning.
Hi, sorry, Grace Ventura again, 25 Peter Road for 33 years. How many times since 1997 has this been asked?
From what I understand, 0. But that's
Okay.
not an important
Thank you.
point.
No, the reason that it hasn't been done is because it's been initiated through the board actions, the custodial boards have recommended it, and town meeting has bought into the idea. And, and again, without the custodial board's agreement, it can't happen. So there's a checks and balances there. So there's a ratification by town meeting, but the custodial board still has control. And if you want to change that control, you change the people sitting there. That's all, if it's that big an issue. And so in order for it to be changed again and to have that happen, the process doesn't allow for it, which is a good thing. Town meeting can't do that right now. Town meeting isn't allowed to do that. So that's why it hasn't happened. And there hasn't been any good reason to change any name of any facility. Everybody's proud of who the facilities have been named after, and they're all very deserving individuals. Some of whom I know, some I never met L.D. Batchelder, but way before my time. But again, it's not to put a damper on this. I'm looking forward to the presentation and the consideration. I just wanted to be upfront and let you people know what the process needs to be and what needs to happen in order to effectuate it. It's entirely up to you whether you decide to move forward with the citizens petition. I mean, it's going to be on the warrant. It's there. What you decide to do with it is entirely up to you. Proceed with a vote at town meeting. I'll move to pass over, give the school committee time to contemplate if they want to change their rules or not. It's entirely up to you. That's the beauty of the democracy portion of it all. But I look forward to the presentation, and knowing Charlie personally, fabulous guy.
Mr. Favreau?
So before I start, just one more question. Has there ever been a citizen's petition that you folks know of that was brought to town meeting, passed unanimously, and just taken as an advisory
I don't know if it's unanimous, but I mean, I know that of petitions and warrant articles that have been put forth for consideration for town meeting that have passed near unanimously, they're pretty close, and then not prevailed. I'll give you the Swan Pond School as a prime example. 3 strikes were out. I mean, that passed not unanimously, but near unanimity at town meeting and failed at the polls 3 times.
Failed at the polls.
Failed at the polls.
Right.
So failed at, but so town meeting action alone does not make it be if the rules don't allow for it. And in those particular instances, when it comes to overrides, we've had overrides that have passed town meeting and lost. There've been instances where town meeting has taken action on budgetary issues and budgetary department issues, and the Board of Selectmen has not implemented it and spent the money.
And the town, of course, has no process to put a proposal like this as part of a general election to be voted on, because the only body that a citizen's petition can go through is town meeting. Is that
Right,
correct?
and even if you were to put it forth as a
Ballot item?
as a ballot item, Mass General Law provides that the custodial boards have jurisdiction over it. So that, again, that would strictly be advisory, based upon my reading. I could be wrong, but the custodial board has authority over those facilities.
Mhm.
What we have done is we have taken that Mass General Laws and been more restrictive by saying, instead of giving them unilateral authority to do so, we put one more extra step in here saying town meeting has to ratify it. That's more restrictive, not more open, more restrictive. So the great and general court, in their wisdom, has established jurisdictional responsibility for facilities
Mhm.
with the custodial boards to handle it. The town, in their wisdom, amended their bylaws saying, you can have all the jurisdiction you want, but if you're gonna go naming things for people, come to us. The town meeting's the means to do it. They could have said, bylaws could say, bring it to the ballot, but they decided to bring it to town meeting. So it's more restrictive,
Okay.
not more open.
Now, what is the process? Say, for instance, the school board agreed to represent this warrant or bring it forward.
Then I think.
Then it's a done deal, if town meeting ratifies.
But then how would the board here get involved? Would you have a say
Nothing.
at that point?
No, we,
So
we,
even
we-
if you-
we- even,
even
your
if
your
you-
presentation here
Excuse me.
tonight is.
Even if you unanimously disagreed, as long as the school committee
They're
brought
the,
it
they're the
forward.
custodial body.
If we unanimously disagree, we might speak to that at town, we
Right.
probably would speak to it at town meeting, but it would be town meeting's vote to determine the action.
Okay.
The school committee decides on the school buildings, like the school committee, if they wanted to say, if we wanted to name this building,
Yeah, I
after Mr.
understand.
Farrow,
Yeah.
and they're opposed to that idea, they can speak all they want. But
Okay,
it's our jurisdiction, and if town meeting ratifies our action, it's done.
okay,
So you just make your pitch, which side of the equation are you on?
okay.
So our opinion would be strictly advisory to town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We could offer it to the
And-
school committee if they were interested in it, but.
I had a chance to talk with Jerry Venezia this morning. I don't think he's here. He said he might make it. I guess he didn't. And he said right now that there is not sentiment on the board for this proposal.
Okay.
So, that's where we stand now. We can go forward and continue with the warrant and see if we get it passed, but it will strictly be an advisory call as far as what I hear.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's not a bad thing.
So I'd be more than happy to go through the presentation if
We
you
would
want me to,
appreciate it.
but,
Yeah.
you okay? And this isn't working, so I'm just gonna try and speak loud. This is where I did it from the last time in front of the school.
Actually, if you just turn that microphone around, I think it'd be in good shape.
It came out all right. So once again, my name's Mark Favreau. I've been living in North Reading and pay taxes here for 29 years. My wife and I, and we have two boys who were raised in the school system, except for a couple of years by one of my son. He went to St. John's Prep. And my oldest son, John, was the one who kind of got this ball rolling. You probably all know there was a letter to the editor that appeared in the transcript probably about a month ago. And the groundswell of support that came after that letter was just amazing. You've even mentioned it here tonight. He set up a petition on change.org, and I'll get into all the specifics of it, but, close to 1,000 people responded. And I can't tell you how proud I am to be a small part of watching many of Charlie's former students get involved in the democratic process. I mean, they're really excited about this, they're very passionate about it, and they thought by starting it this way, something could get done. I know there's going to be a lot of disappointment, but, they did the best they could. The only avenue they knew of, the only process they knew of was to get it on the town warrant and for me to present in front of the school committee. But, of course, when I was in front of the school committee, they weren't really still sure. And matter of fact, when I talked to Mr. Venezia once, he said that, town meeting should prevail. But I guess after doing some legal research, that sounds like that's not the case. So anyway, once again, I'm real proud. Some of you know Charlie, some of you don't know Charlie. I thought what would be helpful, as I did at the school committee meeting, was take you through a little history of who he was. Who was this guy that for 38 years was an educator, a town advocate, a community activist, a technology pioneer? Exactly, what did he do besides teaching in the classroom and being an administrator?
He taught this community how to recycle. There have been more cans collected in this town for the hiking hornets than any other cause I can think of, but go ahead.
So let's go back. So he spent 6 years in the classroom before becoming a teaching administrator. A job, as I mentioned, he loved for 38 years. Mr. Jones was there from the very beginning. He was part of the faculty that opened what was then the new North Reading Junior High School in 1964. And it's a good thing I got a picture because I took a ride by the.
Yeah, there's not much of it left.
It's not there anymore. This is pretty funky. Okay, so after 6 years as a teacher, Charles Jones was appointed acting vice principal. He was one of only 2 acting vice principals that also taught 2 or 3 classes while they were in that position. He also oversaw the development of a team approach, which back in those days was a brand new concept for teaching grade 6, a modification of which is still used today in in this school system and many school systems. After a couple years as acting vice principal, he became the full-time principal, of course elected unanimously by the school board to that position, and at that time started his tenure as a administrator. After several years as vice principal, he was then named principal of the North Reading, which was still called the junior high school at that time. He was appointed to that position, back in the days of 2.5, Proposition 2.5. I know there's a lot of people in this room who remember those days. He had to go in there and cut 5 teachers, but never, ever did the quality of education in that school lose any steam at all, and was still considered one of the best middle high schools or junior high schools in the system. After serving as principal, Charlie found that he really, really missed the classroom. And the only way he could get back into the classroom was to step down as principal and become vice principal. He actually swapped jobs with the then vice principal of the middle school. Because all he really cared about was working closely with the kids. Now he could teach, 4 or 5 different classes per semester and still serve as vice principal. He was also nominated several times for Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, but every time he declined because he felt deferring to full-time teachers was the way to go. However, after his retirement in 2001, he received the Outstanding Educator Award from Salem State University, his alma mater, in 2010. As Charlie usually is, he was very humbled to receive this award. But Charlie's the type of guy who didn't want to receive any award while he was still teaching. So this was given to him. I was lucky enough to attend the event, and he was, as I said, very, very humbled. It was a well-deserved recognition. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is Charlie was a technology pioneer. As new forms of technologies began to emerge in the 80s, Charlie really thought it would make a lot of sense for the middle school to have a computer. But unfortunately, once again, with the issues of 2.5, we just didn't have the money. So he went out and on his own bought the first computer that was used at the North Reading Middle School. He then also volunteered to work with Wang Laboratories on his own time, so that North Reading would be the only school in the district, and the first school in the district actually, that would have all their scheduling created on a computer. It was a pretty big deal back in those days. Charlie was also a great community friend. One thing I forgot to mention about him is that the whole time, the 38 years he served the town of North Reading, he was also a lawyer. So he did some stuff on the side, but most of his time was devoted to the educator status here in North Reading. So these are some of the things he did. Due to his law background, he assisted the local community choral in how to become a charitable corporation. So he did that in his own time, even though he doesn't sing. He served as a counselor on his own, voluntarily, once again taking his personal time, for a community church of which he was not a member. And then another really nice thing he did is he brought a lot of local businesses into the classroom to talk about how these folks started their business, what was involved, what to prepare for. And a lot of people would say, what's a kid in junior high want to know about starting their own business? Charlie thought it was never too early to prepare the kids. So a lot of the kids many of which signed the petition I'll talk about in a minute, own their own businesses right now. I'm lucky my son's one of them. And it all goes back to him trying to teach him what to expect, what was going to happen, and what to focus on if you want to do that someday in your life. Here's another interesting fact about Charlie. I don't know if any of you remember. We had just moved into town. But in 1987, North Reading decided to take part in the 200th anniversary of the ratification of the Constitution. Of course, this wasn't a school event, but a town event. Now, back in those days, in order to serve on the commission, you had to be a resident of North Reading. Mr. Jones, who's been a longtime resident of Beverly, was asked to serve on the commission. The commission felt that his legal expertise, his knowledge of government and politics was invaluable for this commission. So what they did is the Board of Selectmen immediately decided to waive that provision, and Mr. Jones was sworn in not too long after that at North Reading's Town Hall. He's called by many a consummate teacher. He brought the outside world into his classroom. He wanted to teach these kids about government not only through textbooks, but bringing in state legislatures, member of Congress, people in the court system, all to really give the kids a hand-on knowledge and experience and listen to stories of how people who actually run the government do it and what got them interested in it. And then he brought his classroom to the world. And of course, I'm talking about the educational trips. For 27 years, he organized and led these extra trips during his vacations, of course, for no extra pay. And he was able to instill in these kids, who were kids when they started on the trip, the value of discipline, teamwork, responsibility, community. And really, I got to witness it twice myself. I really saw boys and girls change into young men and women by the time they went through this trip. It was an amazing experience. And just to give you a little flavor of what these trips were like, if you look in the upper left-hand corner here, you'll see a kitchen being set up by a bunch of the students. They had the responsibility to set this kitchen up. They all had kitchen patrol every day. When they got up in the morning, they found out if they were the ones that were getting the cereal boxes out, if they were the ones who were going to be washing the dishes, if they were the ones who were going to be making sandwiches for that afternoon's excursion. Everybody had to pitch in, and they learned that responsibility. And none of them complained, not too much anyway. And you see over here the tents set up. Now, when I first heard about this trip, and I volunteered to chaperone on it, I said, how are these kids going to know what to do when they get to a campsite? Some of them never even seen a tent, let alone set one up. But what Charlie did every year for this trip is he had all the kids over his house, probably a week or two before the trip, and spent all Saturday setting up the tents, setting up the kitchen, learning how to put tarpaulins over the top of each one of the tents, because invariably when we were at a certain campsite, it would start raining, and the kids always would stay dry, even under monsoon conditions, believe it or not. Those tents had to be kept clean. There could be an inspection at any time, and when Charlie inspected, it was right out of the military. So they knew what their responsibilities were. It was just amazing to watch. If you look at this one over here, you'll see the kids working like a precision drill team, learning how to unload the truck and how to pack it, because you had to do it scientifically. The right stuff had to be in the nose, the right stuff had to be in the end, and then of course the right stuff had to be in the middle. First couple of times, they weren't quite sure, but after that, every single time, you didn't have to tell them. They knew exactly what to do. It was amazing, and they embraced this responsibility. This here, I believe, is a trip at Zion and Bryce Canyons. Over here, you'll see one of the year's complete group, and you can't really tell in this picture, but that's Mount Rushmore in the background. And you'll see down here that the tents have just been offloaded and getting ready to set up yet another campsite. Long naming traditions in this town and in surrounding towns. We all know the three elementary schools, the J. Turner Hurd, the L.D. Batchelder, and the E. Ethel Little School. And then if you look at towns surrounding us, like in Reading, Andover, and Danvers, you have the Arthur Coolidge Middle School, the Walter S. Parker Middle School, the Doherty Middle School, and the Holton Richmond Middle School in Danvers. This is the tremendous support I was talking about. Right now, there's just under 1,000 signatures on the Charles E. Jones Middle School petition. 370 of them are North Reading residents. 180 people decided to take the time to not only sign the petition, but to write personal letters about Charlie. And I have this is the petition. As you can see, it's quite voluminous. And so is the letters. And I wasn't going to go through all these letters with you because it would take me forever, but there are some themes that run throughout a lot of the letters that were written, and I'll spend 3 slides just giving you an idea what those are. 7 letters to the editor were written in support of this proposal. The 1,000 signatures represent 37 states, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, and there's also signees from 4 foreign countries who used to be students of his or who are now off conquering the world. So let me just give you a flavor once again. I picked the ones that kept reoccurring, as I said in this. These particular comments were repeated one way or the other. The words might change a little bit by much more than one person. No one deserves this more. Never met a more caring and qualified teacher. has gone far above and beyond to enrich so many lives. The best and most influential teacher I had. Taught many skills over and above his history classes. I am who I am as an educator because of Charles E. Jones. His classes and trips taught life skills. True heroes should be remembered forever. Made a lasting impression on countless students in the community. Truly a one-of-a-kind person. The most selfless educator I ever met. I would challenge anybody to think of somebody who deserves this honor more. He taught a lot of young people in this town that they could do anything, and then he showed them the way. Believed in the ability of students to intellectually stretch beyond their perceived limits. Has made a huge impact on thousands of kids who live in North Reading. I am one of them. A wonderful man that helped many children from going down the wrong path. A giant among men in so many ways. The residents are forever grateful for his generosity. A spectacular human being, and he has changed my life for the better. Seems impossible to be able to give back to Charlie what he has given to so many students and families in North Reading. The solution here is simple: change the policy. Okay, the next steps, I think we've already talked about those. We're still attempting to secure the support of the school committee, and we won't stop doing that. And also, we'd love to have the support of the Board of Selectmen, even though it's, as you said, it's not needed, it's the school committee, but it sure would help to have your support. We submitted the citizens petition signed by Pat Lee, who's in the audience tonight, to rename the middle school the Charles E. Jones Middle School. The signatures, I talked to Barbara on Monday. The signatures were certified by the town clerk on Monday. And then we're going to work to get as many people to attend, many citizens to attend town meeting on October 6th as possible, whatever side of this issue they stand on. Once again, as Gary talked about, this should be a democratic process, and we'd like to have everybody who has an opinion on this at town meeting. And that's it. So once again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for the input in the beginning. And if after seeing the presentation you have any questions for me or anybody else in the audience, let us know.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
I want to thank you because, you know, I've been hearing about this since it started, and I had no idea who he was, and so this is educating for me. And as I'm watching your presentation, I keep looking out in the crowd and seeing the reaction that, you know, that every time you said something and every time you changed this, I'm getting a little emotional myself because just watching them was just great. So I commend you for putting a great presentation together. And if nothing else comes of it, I have a huge appreciation for who this gentleman is now. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
My, two of my three kids, all of them had Mr. Jones, but two of them made the trip. And, I think one of them has actually called in and put his name on the petition. Found that out recently.
His dad first?
Without checking, right. And I served on the school committee for 12 years during Charlie's tenure. And during that change, when he went back from principal to vice principal. And he was a great guy. I know him personally, and I can't think of a better person. But again, I think the middle school isn't going to be completed for a year.
Yeah.
We have a whole year to get this thing vetted out. We have time for the school committee to decide on what they want to do with their policy, because I think they have to change their policy to be able to make a recommendation. And hopefully at some point, this will come to a resolution one way or another.
Okay.
And I thank you for your efforts and everyone else here. It's not often that we have a number of visitors at our boring board meetings. But thank you. Mr. Yule.
Yes, incredible people should always be recognized, and apparently Mr. Jones is a rather incredible person. He's affected many, many people. I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I would think that if the school committee were support this effort, I don't see any reason why we would. I shouldn't say we, but for myself, I couldn't see any reason not to, because, as I said, incredible people should be recognized.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure at some point there'll be another presentation in front of the school committee, so get ready for an invite. And I've left a copy of the letters and the petition and the presentation.
Actually, why don't you present them to the chairman, and they'll be incorporated as part of the minutes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you for your reply.
How are you? Yes, you know what, do you have an email address?
Yeah.
Can you give me, I can send it to
Give
you.
it to me.
Sure.
Sure.
Great. I'll send out this information later, okay? Great, thank you.
Yeah, Bob?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Sandy DeStaso,
Why don't we just,
61 Spruce Road,
Yes.
North Reading, been here for 30 years. And this guy, I want to thank Mr. Favreau, he hit it right on the nose about Mr. Jones. And something I really liked about Mr. Jones was his ability to lead, because as you know, as a leader, it's the resources you have behind you to be a good leader. And this guy hit it right on the nose, because we've been on a couple of trips with him. So if he went to certain areas, if he was going to parks, national parks, he always had someone who was a resource and who knew the national parks and who could get in there free of charge, actually, through the government. They worked out however they did it. He also knew in the remote parts that we went to, like the Grand Tetons, this guy always had a nurse on board, and he always had a physician on board. And he had people who worked hard, as you guys know. Jack, we were all exhausted. He knew the middle part of that trip. It wasn't going to be people who wanted to go to Las Vegas to stay in the hotel rooms. He put people on there that were going to work. And I can only speak personally of my own experience with both my sons had him. I had an older boy who was kind of quiet, and he took him to the Air Force Academy, and I said, he's too quiet to go in there. He ended up going there. Now he's still in there. He's a captain in the Air Force. And I was so proud of Mr. Jones. When was it, about a year ago? She's gonna cry, I know. Because my son got married there in June of 13. And not only did he come, he showed up in Colorado to go to that wedding, as well as Claudia. And he talked to us like the whole night about all the stuff, and I realized that it was him that helped him make it there. I couldn't have seen that in other ways. And even some of the kids that I saw that were very quiet came out of their shell and would talk, and I was just totally amazed. So I just wanted to add that to Mr. Favreau's speech. And like I said, I really appreciate that you came forward. This guy's a great guy. I think everybody knows it. It's nothing new.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can move along and not spend till midnight here. Discuss the J.T. Berry Center property.
Mr. Prisco isn't here. If we want to wait till is he coming?
He said
believe
he's coming back,
so
so
why don't we
we'll
hold off?
hold off on that. So we have a sign a licensing agreement, Article 19, 2014 annual town meeting. I guess we're still not ready.
That's on hold. Yeah.
That's on hold, gonna pass over that. Okay, appointments, Martin's Pond Committee.
It's Michael again.
No, but
Well, we can do it.
That we can do, I think,
He
because I
filled me
think,
in on that.
yeah. Mr. Chairman, I move to place in nomination the following names for appointment to the Martins Pond Reclamation Study Committee for a term to expire December 31st, 2016.
Second.
I didn't put the names out yet. Hold on. Lawrence Susi, 4 Alston Road. Laurie Lyons, 14 Camo Road.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. My understanding, by the way, is there's no limit to this committee?
Right. I think you're correct.
I thought I heard. So we have unlimited positions and therefore appointing 2 people.
And the more the merrier.
The more the merrier. Mr. Prisco reported that he had talked to both these individuals. One was on the committee previously and for some reason either forgot to or didn't reapply. And so there was a period of time that the individual was off the committee. But both the individual that was on the committee is interested in getting back on, and the new individual is also very interested. I think he met with Janet Nicosia this evening to talk about it prior to our meeting. So I, on behalf of Mr. Prisco, I recommend that we appoint both individuals to the committee. Mr. Yule.
Yes, I know both of these individuals, and they are exemplary in their involvement within the community in many, many, many levels. And you don't really get better people like those 2 involved. And so I would support the idea of them being part of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Yule. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Next item on our agenda then is to review the October town meeting articles. This is not the public hearing on the articles, which we'll hold next month.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to review the listing at this point in time, if you'd like.
Okay. Yes, please.
Excellent, thank you. So beyond the articles that have been discussed in the previous listing, we have a couple of modifications that have happened in the past 2 weeks. As was stated earlier, we received a citizen's petition on Friday, certified by the town clerk, with sufficient signatures relative to the naming of the middle school. So that has been added to the listing. The two warrant articles relative to street acceptance for Swan Pond Road and Adams, both on the recommendation of DPW, will be removed from the draft warrant. But one item that has been identified that is being recommended to replace that article is authorizing the board to file special legislation which would essentially carve out the Swan Pond Road right-of-way officially. That's an act that would need to take place. It would require special legislation approved by the state legislature. So the recommendation would be to substitute the 2 street acceptances with that act to achieve that. And that this would essentially memorialize the existence of the road that's already in place there.
Okay, so in the past, when we've done the street acceptances, we've had to approve the engineering drawings. Does this require a similar process?
There would be a plan that would be developed. I believe a plan has been developed, I should correct myself, for Swan Pond Road. It essentially would become a legislative matter of drafting an article to file legislation with the Great and General Court to achieve the creation of the right-of-way.
Okay.
But the plans have been developed, at least to my understanding they have been at this point.
And Adams Street is on hold.
On hold
Okay.
altogether,
Okay.
correct. This would only address Swan Pond Road. We did receive an article requesting, and this came from the Historical Commission, funding for an interpretive display of Native American artifacts recovered from the J.T. Berry site. So we'll work to craft language to be heard at the public hearing on September 8th to learn more about that request.
Mrs. Romeo is here, I assume, related to that, because I know she did mention it to me previously. Is there an amount of money in mind, or is that still being developed?
We were still looking at trying to get that money from a trust fund.
Mm-hmm.
So that hasn't been
Microphone.
clarified yet. If there is enough money in one of the trust funds that is aimed at the center
Thank you,
of
Ms.
town.
Steele.
Sorry.
We want you to be heard. By everybody.
If there is enough money remaining in one of the trust funds that is targeted for the center of town for educational or entertainment purposes, and there are several, then we would go for one of those trust funds. If that's not the case, then we will go for the warrant article. I'm trying to discuss that with Mr. Simons, but he was out of town this past week because of a death in the family, so hopefully that will be clarified this week.
And you'll get back to the town administrator? You'll get back to the town administrator?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll get back
Thank
to
you.
you immediately.
Excellent.
Mr.
And
Yule?
that would be about $25,000.
Mr. Yule?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago when I was on the board, and I can't think, I'm gonna have to research my, my records.
That did come up about several years, maybe about 4 years ago, 3
Yeah.
years ago. It did, and we never expended that.
I do remember that, because I was.
We
the-
didn't, the
Yeah.
whole project went on hold.
Right,
Right,
Right.
so we never used it.
okay, but what I was actually getting to is that there are some, I just can't remember the name of the organization that does it, but there's a way to get some funds for what you're asking, and I'm gonna research that. I'm gonna have to go back through my notes and try to find it.
Might have been Mass Historic,
I think you're
Mass
right.
Historic Commission,
You might be right.
which is always a matching grant, and there are usually 4 rounds a year, but their funds are
Depleted?
fewer and far between lately. I don't think they have another round. We did look at it, the secretary looked at it, and I don't think there's another one until next spring.
Well, I'll still search my records, and if that's not who I was thinking of, then
Okay.
hopefully I'll be able to forward that
Yeah,
information to you, because.
we really did dig around for grants, and we came up pretty dry on that.
Right. What about any fundraising, any possibility of doing something like that? Or some philanthropic donation?
Well, what with the Putnam House and the Farm Museum, we're kind of stretched out for fundraising events. We're ringing everybody out at the moment.
All right, well, I'll look into that and I'll see what I can find.
Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Beyond that, the only other immediate modifications are as follows. The article listed to appropriate funding for the sprinkler system in the ballroom in the Damon Tavern. It's been identified that there is sufficient funding available to achieve that project, utilizing the existing revolving fund for that facility under the control of the Department of Public Works. I should also note that the Historic Commission, I know, has also endorsed that installation as well at their meeting of, I believe it was August 6th as well. So it would be our intention to proceed with that. This article can be withdrawn because we have more than sufficient funding in the revolving fund to pay for that work to occur.
And that'll finally open it up to the public?
Yeah, my understanding of what will play out is that
Fantastic.
essentially the fire suppression system will be extended into that room. There'll be a review of the facility by the building inspector, and that installation will then allow for occupancy, with some limitations due to its size, but for occupancy to occur. That is my understanding at this point in time. So it's certainly a good thing for the town. It will not require any action at town meeting. It'll be withdrawn from the warrant.
Mr. Yule?
Yeah, I wasn't sure that I caught what you had said initially on your rundown of some of the articles. So if I'm repeating something you already answered, forgive me. But Article 17, to amend the general bylaws, what did we decide to do with that? Are we still
I'm sorry,
gonna-
I've been working actually in the reverse order, moving from the bottom of the list to the top, which is probably, so I haven't gotten.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought
Um,
you did all of them. Okay, I apologize. I'll wait for you.
No problem. So again, the DPW was asked to withdraw the Damon Tavern Ballroom article. Naming of public properties, I believe that was before we had this evening's opinion. I don't believe that there's any need for additional action unless the board so desires with regard to the general bylaws. So presuming that the question has been answered, the article would be removed from the draft warrant.
I would concur with that, I
Yeah.
think. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
you concur? Take it out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Continuing to go through the general bylaw changes, those have been on the listing, so I don't think it's necessary to repeat them. They'll be heard more in depth at the hearing on September 8th. Moving up the list, item number 11, which the board opted to vote to release, that will require an appropriation at town meeting. And so we'll be putting together an article that will cover that, and that's projected at $50,000 at this point in time. Moving up to item number 10, again, we await more official information from the state, but that may be one article. It's possible that it may be multiple articles in order to achieve it. But I think we await something in writing from the state to make that determination at this point in time.
You might want to be more specific, just so people viewing.
Sure, sorry,
what we're
item 10
talking
is, number 10 is the J.T. Berry Center. Again, awaiting something official and in writing. And at that point in time, we'll take the information and try to translate it into what it means for the warrant. That will happen between meetings. It'll happen before September 8th, we hope, at this point in time. So there may be more than one article that's listed there, depending upon what we receive in writing. Continuing to move up, there's no changes going, the articles prior to Article 10 at this point. I would note Article 8, we continue to review cost estimates for the renovation of this meeting room. I know that there was a proposal that was put in a capital planning process a number of months ago. It's been revisited in light of some other ongoing work that's been done in the town hall. We may need to increase that, but we'll have a more updated number for the board at the, presumably at the hearing on September 8th. And I do not believe there's any other modifications to the listing at this point in time beyond what I've described.
Okay. Mr. Yule.
May I ask what the modifications are planned for this room?
I'd be certainly glad to speak to it. My understanding is that there was a capital request that was proposed by the Department of Public Works, and that I believe, and somebody please stop me if I have this incorrectly, but that there was support from the Board of Selectmen to perform improvements to this room for purposes of functionality for public meetings, but also for the public to view meetings as well within the room. That is my understanding, at least. Certainly anyone could correct me. But I believe there was a cost estimate that was obtained some 6 months or so ago, and I just am noting that I believe there's a revised cost estimate that'll be forthcoming with regard to the cost.
Which involved the redoing of the floor, new furniture, and more of an arc for board meetings.
Oh, you mean like?
So we can see each other.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm in.
Just general upgrade of this room. That's part of our overall trying to piecemeal.
I just hope it's not a lot of money, that's all.
It's always a lot of money. It's a long-term investment.
Yeah.
Last time we ever did anything here was, we moved in '89,
And, you know,
and someone donated the chairs, so it's.
And, you know, we made some improvements in the way we laid out the room in one sense, and
Right.
in another we made it worse,
Right,
mainly because these tables are straight.
right.
That's why people that tap me on the shoulder. I'm looking over here. I
Yeah.
have to train myself to keep looking back and forth.
Well, it was no different over there either, so.
Yeah.
But actually, you had the tables turned in, so that worked out. but-
Anyway,
Okay, anyway,
that's what that was about.
thank you.
Yes, it's not on the listing at this point. Sorry. So one other modification is the Hillview Commission had a meeting subsequent to the Board of Selectmen's meeting on August 4th, and they requested to withdraw the potential article that they had notified they may submit because they do not intend to seek funding at this time. Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Selectman.
Anything else?
I believe that I've hit any of the modifications from the previous existing list.
Okay, and we've scheduled a public hearing. It'll be advertised for September 8th.
Believe so, yes.
To review the articles.
That's
as
correct.
they stand. And the warrant is officially closed to citizens petitions effective today.
Today. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I don't know if Mike is making it back or not.
I just tried texting right now.
Yeah, probably.
Well, I don't think we need to
I don't
make
think,
any
as far as
decision
Berry
until-
stuff goes, we're just waiting to hear back from them on a term
Right.
sheet.
Right.
So as soon as we hear the term sheet, we'll disclose that, so.
Right, so what was presented at a previous meeting was that there were three options. The board did center on the second option was to take responsibility for marketing the property based on the incentives. Mr. O'Leary this evening suggested that we also look at option 1 and 3 again and just take another look at it, maybe do a little further diligence as to whether or not we want to revisit those options, in addition to waiting for what we've asked from the state. Mr. Prisco took some notes associated with asking for additional information on option 1 and 3. Any further discussion regarding the Berry Center property at this point? Okay. That gets us to the town administrator's report, and this will be your first official report of the meeting, I guess.
Yes, sir. Submitted a report to the board on Friday. It's a handful of items that I'll reference in my comments. The first being that there has been a reception scheduled to honor Helena Minton, the library director, who will be retiring. This event will be held on Saturday, September 13th, from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. at the library. There's an invitation in the packet as well for the board to have for the record. Continue to work to finalize the hiring of a new director. Thought as recently as this afternoon that we may have everything in order to make an announcement. Not quite there at this point in time, but expect that that'll happen in the next day or so. And we'll certainly keep the board and the community informed with regard to that. Secondly, I noted that at an introductory meeting that I attended with the Reading Municipal Light Department, they indicated that they, as a result of the state grant funding that they received for LED streetlights, I know Selectman Fode, I think you're pretty briefed on this, so correct me if I've got anything wrong, but they will essentially be installing pilot LED streetlights at 3 locations in town in the coming weeks. We'll put a notice up on the website and on the cable television as well, but the locations are Main Street, north of Park Street, Town Hall and the vicinity of North Street near the Town Hall, and at Pine Avenue, and then right in front of the Hillview on North Street and Country Club Road. Again, it's a pilot program that they'll be proceeding with, and there's a briefing that I attached in the report.
And these are replacing existing
Yes, sir.
lights, not additional lights?
That's correct, yes, sir. The Police and Public Works Departments, with input from the Community Planning Commission, did submit a grant application for potential state funding for curve safety signage on North Street at Pine Ridge Road and Chestnut Street at New Street. It's a program that's been put out, I believe, by the State Department of Transportation, looking for data-driven locations where signage could perhaps reduce the incidence of accidents on roadways that, for which a curvature in the roadway is determined to be the cause. These are locations that were identified by members of the Community Planning Commission, reviewed by the Police Department, reviewed by the town engineer, and ultimately submitted. So we'll keep the board advised and the community advised as to whether or not we receive that grant funding. As I communicated with the board members during the week, and as some people may have noticed, there will be some increased usage of the Town Hall ball field. There's a note from the Recreation Director that I included, but basically it just noted that there would be a portable sanitary facility installed, which has been done, that there would be a portable storage facility, which has also been installed, and that as the season progresses and as the hour of darkness becomes earlier and earlier, there will be the installation of lighting for the field as well for that facility to be utilized. And again, it's because of a shortage of available facilities. And the final piece I just noted was that, in general, I continue to attend board and commission meetings for introductory purposes. I have spoken with staff in Congressman Turney's office, Senator Tarr's office, and Representative Brad Jones' office. I expect to meet or speak with each legislator individually in the coming weeks, and we'll continue to schedule such introductory meetings.
Any questions for town administrator?
Thank you.
Just those emails you sent us.
Two other items that have just been identified that I will add. First is that there was a public meeting that was held at the Secondary School Building Committee last week. There was some discussion relative to improvements being made to Sherman Road as a result of the impact on that road from the construction access going on at that site. In the end, a determination was made that we will repair that road, and we'll do so to the town's advantage by going through the town's internally procured contractor to do the work up there. That work will happen sooner rather than later. It needs to be completed before the first day of school, and the deadline we've given for that work to be completed by the contractor is Friday, September 5th. So just for the community's knowledge and for those residents, the project PMA is to do a notice to those abutters to make sure that they are alerted that that work is going on. And then second item, there is a transportation forum, and I know that's been an important matter for the town, and I'm continuing to inform myself on the matter of transportation, particularly public transportation. There is a forum that Congressman Tierney has scheduled tomorrow in Burlington that I do plan to attend. I believe Selectman Fode as well, you may be attending as well, with the purposes of just trying to understand what resources might be out there and what could assist the town. So, Selectman O'Leary, thank you. I believe that concludes my report.
With respect to some of these road repairs, I'd like to commend the DPW for the work they've done with respect to these small zone patches rather than just pothole
Right.
patches, which makes for a much better road repair. It's quite noticeable. I mean, the patches are noticeable because they're black versus the gray roads. But in some of the areas that, you know, I drive through on a regular basis where the roads have just been, certain little patches of the roads are just totally potholes year-round. And they'd patch them and, you know, 2 weeks later, the hole's there. And since they've put these, stripped those small square areas and patched them, they're much, much improved. So that seems to be something new. I don't know whether it's a result of some of the additional money that we got for the winter pothole patching that came up later in the budget.
That's my understanding. The winter recovery, rapid recovery program, I believe, funded those repairs. They occurred prior to my time working for the town, but that is my understanding.
It's a good technique that they're using. It's not, as you say, not just potholes, but they're on a strip, and it's good for when I'm running too, you know?
Mr.
It's
Chairman,
nice and smooth.
with regard to Sherman Road, I do think that that's going to be a more aggressive repair to
Yes.
ensure that it can hold up to vehicular traffic, heavy traffic that goes on that road, particularly buses. So,
Just, Mr. Chairman, in relation to Sherman Road, I want to again acknowledge and thank Mr. Gilberto and Mr. Cannavale for their rapid response. I was at the Secondary School Building Committee meeting and having discussions in relation to the condition of Sherman Road. Again, that's the major access for, it's going to be the major access for the school buses. But the road itself has deteriorated significantly, first of all because of the weather conditions last winter, but also the repairs that were made by the utility, the gas utility. They did a horrible job of patching the road, and because of the time of year they did it and all the rest, but it's just the condition of the road is deteriorating significantly. In addition to that, the sidewalk itself is in disrepair and is utilized by students on a regular basis. So the need was obvious. Originally, again, this is before we started cutting things, the Sherman Road was going to be part of the scope of the project, but it was cut out. And nobody was really, if you look at Mr. Cannavale's list, Sherman Road wasn't on the list for the next 3 years because it was assumed that it was part of the project. Well, it wasn't. The condition of the road is substantially deteriorated, and the need to do it prior to the completion of the project is essential. So PMA and Gilbane went out and got quotes for the repair of the sidewalk and the Sherman Road. So I called Michael during the meeting and said, you know, could you get hold of Dick, see if we could make arrangements to get our contractor up there and take a look at it and see if we could realize some savings. I mean, the project is going to pay for it, and it's coming in at almost half the cost. So their
For more
rapid,
extensive work.
their rapid, for more extensive work. So their rapid response and willingness to work with PMA and Gilbane is going to pay dividends and repair the road. So
Great.
it's terrific. And I appreciate the attentiveness and timeliness of their response.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else for town administrator? All new business, Mr. O'Leary?
I have nothing other than, we're not going to meet until after
Labor Day.
Labor Day. And by the way, on the 8th, I will be out of town, out of state. So I will not be available for all the public hearings, and you're going to have to find some sort of a acting clerk
Okay.
for that evening.
You're away for the week?
I am away Monday through Friday, so I won't be available. Just let you
All
know.
right, we'll make such arrangements.
So, other than that, safe and happy holiday to everybody.
Mr. Gilberto?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking to the recording secretary, Ms. Brooks. Do I have the dates right on the hearing? Or is the board going to be asked to sign the warrant on the 8th and have the hearing on the 15th?
I'm not sure, I'd have to look at the.
That kinda makes
the other
sense.
Yeah,
That would
I
make
think I'm-
sense.
Yeah, I think I've said the 8th, but I believe you're signing the warrant on the 8th and having the hearings on the
We're purposely
15th.
meeting the following week.
Right, exactly, exactly. So my apologies for having to correct myself.
All right, so the public hearing will be on the
15.
15th instead.
And we'll advise the citizens petitioners as well.
All right, so you can't escape that, Mr. O'Leary.
Oh, wait a minute, he's going away the
Well, I'm
following
going
week.
away for 2 weeks.
It was just extended.
The only thing that, not worse, but the ones that I really miss is when I miss the ones where you have to sign all those bonds. Yeah, I miss those sometimes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Yule.
Yes. Last Monday, the Northeast Municipal Gas Pipeline Coalition met here in North Reading at the police station. Unfortunately, for personal reasons, I was unable to attend. However, Danielle McKnight did fill in, and from the information that she passed on to me, she's very thorough, and I appreciate that. The coalition basically is still in a position of gathering information. As it turns out that the Kinder Morgan has delayed their they call it, they're filing with FERC, which is due September 15th. So the next meeting that we're going to have will be August 25th, and that will be in Townsend Town Hall. But right now, they're just gathering information. The Neshoba Conservation, this fellow Ken Heritage of the Neshoba Conservation Trust made a presentation. NESCO had postponed moving forward with a tariff for at least a month for the following, here's a variety of reasons. So the coalition, as I said, is basically gathering information now to see what direction they can go. Right now, it's a little bit on hold because of the change with Kinder Morgan.
And I read and heard that Senator Elizabeth Warren has come out in opposition to the current proposed plan and route, which again is helpful, hopefully. And I would hope that our congressman, if you talk to him tomorrow, would ask him to weigh in one way or the other. And again, the more help we can get, the better. Again, the route that they're looking to take is the most expeditious route for themselves.
Right.
And cost-effective route for themselves. It appears to be devoid of environmental impact and impacts on the community. So there may be other ways to accomplish what they're looking to do. It's going to be more costly for them, and they have deep pockets, and they should do it. They should give due consideration towards taking the least expeditious route and the most minimally invasive route. So I was heartened to see that Senator Warren took a public stand on it. It's helpful.
You all done?
That's, I just wanted to update.
Mr. Fode.
Thank you.
Just two quick items. Oh, the first one is just want to congratulate Mr. Bernard on being named the superintendent of schools. The high school's loss is the rest of the school community's gain. I'm glad that that he threw his name in the hat, and I think he'll do a wonderful job. The other thing is, I think we don't meet again before kids go back to school, so enjoy the next 3 weeks, and
And then be careful.
and be prepared. Be prepared to go back. But that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. There's a financial planning meeting scheduled for this Friday. I don't know if you got the agenda. So, and we just basically will be looking at the year end, starting to talk about the forthcoming budget, and as we do, review the issues that may come forward in the school project that we might need to pay attention to. I haven't heard of any in the past summer. Seems to have gone quite well, and things seem to be on schedule. I had the opportunity, it was a Thursday or the Wednesday before I went on vacation to tour the facility. My son Rob, a graduate of North Reading High School, happened to be in town from Seattle, and he tagged along, and then my wife decided that she wanted to see, so the three of us went for a tour along with town administrator, Mr. O'Leary, I think joined us at some point in time, and I had to say I was, because of my injury, I hadn't had an opportunity to walk through there in a while, and I was totally impressed with the progress, and I think the entire community is going to be very, very pleased when they get their opportunity to walk through.
And their opportunity is going to be September 20th.
Right. And of course, the students of non-Reading will have their opportunity a little sooner. Come a long way. Yet there's a lot to do in terms of finishing the middle school and the rest of the project.
They have to finish tearing it apart. I tell you, there isn't much left of the middle school.
Yeah.
It's amazing, you know.
So that's moving right along, and the entire community will be very proud and know full well that the investment that they've had to make in terms of increased taxes has been well spent. I think that's all I have. Just a reminder to the board that at our next meeting will be past Labor Day, and we'll be back to more formal dress.
Maybe Mr. Prisco has all the new business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's not getting. I apologize, everybody. Trying to pack my son up and head off to college tomorrow morning, so we had some family over. I apologize for missing the open session. Only had a couple things. Did you guys talk about the telephone poles and the road? Did you guys have any?
No.
I've received so many calls on it, so I thought maybe we could just let people know that I'm sure Mr. O'Leary has more insight on it, but I understand that, you know, it's a timing issue with the utilities. We don't plan to leave the poles there in the middle of the road. It's an unfortunate situation that we had to pave, and we had to stick with the schedule, and that the plan is to remove the poles and then fill in those holes afterwards. Not the desire, but maybe it's still there. If you have any more.
It's a very frustrating experience in dealing with Verizon and the lack of cooperation and timing of this whole issue. As far as hearing from constituents, I heard loudly from one that lives at 15 Mead Road, my wife, as to the absurdity of the whole situation and how could we possibly let this occur? And, the answer's still the same. It wasn't planned. And again, we're at the mercy of the utilities, which specifically Verizon. And it's an unfortunate set of circumstances. First of all, that they're there, and secondly, the way that it's sitting right now.
And Michael, I appreciate the effort you tried in the last week or so. I know you were only here a few days, but Mr. Gilberto, he'd made a valid effort to try to get RMLD to move, Verizon to move. He was all over Jeff Wenton at PMA, putting a little more pressure on them, but obviously, nothing worked.
There's been plenty of pressure put on PMA, Gilbane. Reading Municipal Light has not been uncooperative. Mm-hmm. It's Verizon.
Yeah.
And Verizon alone. And,
it's unfortunate.
it is extremely unfortunate.
And then the last thing I had was, I have received several calls regarding the coyote issues in some of the neighborhoods around town. Probably something I brought to Mr. Gilberto about an issue, probably going to have to figure out something, if there is anything we can do about it. But it is growing concern for some residents. I got the message. I actually have a couple of voicemails at my home that I haven't had a time to return, but I've got note of it. I don't know if the other board members have received any calls on it, but it is a growing issue.
I have seen the other day, just 2 houses down from mine,
Yeah.
quite large coyote.
Yeah.
And I've seen a couple of them go through, they cut through just like the deer cut through
Yes,
in
that's
that
right.
area. There's a path from the woods, so they're out there. And then I heard, maybe it was from you,
I forwarded you
About-
some of the messages.
coyote pups, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
in our neighborhood, there's a lot, so.
Is there a specific area in town where they're being seen the most? I haven't, because in my side of town, I haven't heard or seen.
Yeah, it's primarily down near like the Strawberry and.
I've seen them on Orchard, I've
Equestrian.
seen them on Susan,
Down by Bob
Right.
and then up in his
Shasta,
area.
Shasta, the folks over in
We've
Shasta.
seen them cut through my yard.
Martin's Pond, I mean, that's, Swamp Pond,
Yeah, they're all around.
but
And my area too.
they're growing.
Yeah.
And they've been around for years.
They have not been as visible as they
Yeah.
are this year.
In the daytime.
And you know, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
my mother's from over to Haverhill Street, same thing,
We-
Wood School.
For
Lots.
several years, we had
Backyard.
these large flocks of turkeys, as many
Yeah.
as,
They're back.
I
For now.
haven't seen them.
There were two trying to
my
cross the street.
coyotes have
There were two of them
eaten
trying to
them
cross the street. They were coming from Kitty's to Heavenly Donuts tonight on the way over. So,
coffee?
I don't know where they're going. I don't know if they were going for a pizza
A
They-
coffee.
they
or a
eat
muffin.
out of my
I don't know if they're going for
neighborhood.
a pizza or a muffin, but there were a couple of them there on the way over here to this evening.
Well, we have turkeys in our yard, so.
They
That's
go
all.
to a safer part of town.
That's all I have, Bob.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Michael.
And again, I'm sorry.
Anything
I
else
missed the open
before
session.
we?
Yeah, I don't know what role we can play. I don't know what role we can
Mrs.
play as far as
Romeo.
coyote.
I'm not a member of the board, but I'd just like to give you one parting shot. Today was a really exciting day in the center of town. Mr. Touras was there, and we put up the framework, I shouldn't say we, the Minutemen put up the framework for the Farmers Museum down on the Putnam House
Mhm.
property. So the whole roof line and all for the new museum for the farm equipment is up, and the building should be finished in time for the Apple Festival on September
Oh, great.
20th.
That's-
So you gotta get down there and see it, because all of that old farm equipment that used to be rotting in the fields when all our beautiful farms were shut down for residential development, where a lot of people live now that are here, is now going to be preserved so that people that move into town will be able to see what North Reading was like years ago. It really is going to be a great thing for the town and future generations to see what we will like one day. So get down there and see it and enjoy.
Thank you.
It's a gift.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, we're going back.
No, we're going back into executive session, sorry.
All right, Jane, you got to take good notes again here. Mr. Chairman, I move.
I will.
Are you there? Mr. Chairman, I move to enter into executive session for the purposes of litigation strategy and to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. Such discussions in open session will have a detrimental impact on the town, and further, that the Board of Selectmen will return to open session for the sole purpose of adjournment. And
Second.
to further admit, members of the Finance Committee, Herbert Kelleher, Finance Director Paveo, the Town
Second.
Administrator.
Second. Third.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Yule. Mr.
Aye.
Prisco. Mr. Fode.
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
You gotta make it short.
Take-